You're about to take part in a time-traveling road trip through the highs and lows of pop culture. A road trip with a clear destination and many stops along the way. This is but one act of one chapter of the serialized journey.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Every time I meet a man, he's either gay or a bear.
When we last left off, we continued our deep dive into MST3K's 8th season with the history of American International Pictures, time travel sex shenanigans, the correlation between adolescent aggression and lycanthropy, anti-Scandinavian slurs, and bombastic yet apologetic narrators. This week is all about the facilities for naive cloned organ donors, title disputes with Stanley Kubrick, disturbing bear men, and aspects of Wisconsin that are definitely not featured in travel brochures. As always, I am Ryan Rodriguez, and you were stuck with the Clonus Chronicles Season 1, The History and Legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Tonight's episode...
Chapter 11, Sci-Fi Odyssey, Act 5.
Yeah, Packers!
Today, the podcast is kicking into high gear with one of the very best experiments, and by that I mean very worst, that Season 8 has to offer. The start of a run of truly strange and fertile movies, and TV shows posing as movies, that will, for the most part, continue for the remainder of the year. This is where everything that had been building for the first 9 episodes of the season began to come together into a clear, definable new organism. This is what I'm looking for when I hear the words mystery, science, and theater. Let's get the week truly started with a movie that should make us all grateful as a species for the existence of MST3K, an ode to the disgusting backwoods of Wisconsin, 1975's The Giant Spider Invasion.
They came from another world to destroy the Earth. It was the Giant Spider Invasion.
I'm still measuring an X-ray shower from the ground level at a magnitude never before measured on Earth except a nuclear explosion.
Well, Doctor, it could be an abortive strike from a unfriendly power.
Oh, come on. You don't think a missile landed here?
I told you something landed here last night.
This is the sheriff. Get on the emergency unit. I'm down here all by myself. They're hell-bent on destroying that beast. The crowd's beginning to take over. Well, call the National Guard back. Tell them we need some heavy equipment. Guns, tanks, anything.
They came by the hundreds, by the thousands, killing and crippling, creeping, crawling creatures determined to destroy the Earth. Could anything stop them? Could anything stop the Giant Spider Invasion? There has never been a film like this before.
Giant Spider Invasion was directed by Bill Rebane, who made his debut with Season 4's Monster A Go-Go, which title-wise makes perfect sense, before moving on to movies like 1987's Blood Harvest, a horror movie starring Tiny Tim, and 1988's Twister's Revenge, about a sentient talking monster truck. The script started as a story from Rebane and Richard L. Huff, but when filming began, only some pages of dialogue were finished. Rebane tasked his friend and co-star Robert Easton, one of the few people with the nickname the Man of a Thousand Voices, with finishing the script by locking him in a cabin with the promise of being fed only if he wrote at least 10 pages a day. Good start. Joining Easton in the cast, Alan Hale Jr., who was in Gilligan's Island, as Mike and the Bots will remind you, as well as Season 6's Angel's Revenge, Barbara Hale, no relation, best known as Perry Mason's secretary and the real-life mother of William Catt, Leslie Parrish, a regular on television who appeared in The Manchurian Candidate and 2-time RiffTrax subject Missile to the Moon earlier in career, and Steve Brody, a heavy going back to the 1940s in films like Out of the Past. It's an experiment of many firsts for this new era of MST3K, being the first color film of the season, which is shockingly refreshing even if the film looks like underlit garbage, the northern prelude to a series of increasingly squalid southern sagas like Boggy Creek 2 and Squirm from Season 10, and the origin of yelling the name of a certain sports team during scenes of riotous crowds.
Packers! Woo! Go Packers! Honey, I'm home! Honey, Packers won the Super Bowl! Woo! Packers! Woo! Packers!
Welcome to Gleason, Wisconsin. Unbeknownst to the citizenry, God has lobbed a meteor presumably loaded with spiders in their direction to cleanse the earth.
You know, they're poor only in money and spirit and dignity and moral fiber and hygiene.
Alan Hale is Sheriff Jones, presiding over this unsanitary hovel in a loose-fitting, far too unbuttoned shirt, answering phones like the world's worst Bob Newhart impersonator.
Hello, Sheriff's Office.
Professor made a toaster out of coconuts? Wow.
I see. Uh-huh. Disturbing the peace?
We could do that.
Yes, ma'am. That's an arrestable offense.
Repeat what you say to provide exposition?
No, the law does not apply to preaching.
Unfortunately, he's not our protagonist. That would be Robert Easton as Dan Kester, a man who never met a woman he couldn't berate, a set of clothes he couldn't stain, an audience member he couldn't disgust. Kester actively courts your hatred with grizzled abandon, nagging his alcoholic wife, making lascivious quasi-advances toward her sister,
Ed Wood's Lolita.
treating his Ford pickup with more delicacy and love than any human being,
Like a rock!
Okay.
and playing hide the stale salami at the local brothel with a screen door when he's supposed to be listening to sermons from the local stereotypical preacher.
Can you come again tomorrow night?
Well, I certainly hope so.
The revival will be still here.
Give me that old-time religion. Boy, I can hardly wait to get saved again tomorrow night.
Oh, Dan, wait.
I forgot to validate your parking.
You forgot your back bracelet.
Oh, my. Oh, he's pink.
I don't know how, but I just became sterile.
Go, spiders, go, spiders, go, go, spiders.
Scares the death out of me.
He's lactating.
Put the gun away.
What the hell are you doing sneaking in here at this hour?
What a handsome man.
Sidebar. I have a feeling that no matter how hard I try to rein in my looks and be presentable, the world always sees something approximate to Kester, and it makes me sad. End sidebar. That meteor that I mentioned earlier, it lands right in Kester's backyard.
What the hell was that?
It's befuddling my dumb cracker mind.
Nobody in town seems to be aware of the explosion aside from Kester and his wife, but they are experiencing electrical malfunctions, which we learn through another scene with Alan Hale mugging on the phone.
Hello, Sheriff's Office. Uh-huh.
Don't act with your tongue,
I
Alan.
see.
So I should button my shirt.
Say your radio won't work? Well, all I can tell you is call Joe's Radio Shop. It opens 9 a.m. sharp.
Say your space-based missile defense system won't work?
Your car won't start?
And you might be a redneck.
I can tell you is call Ernie's Auto Repair. He opens at 8.
Maybe he's Amish and doesn't believe in buttons.
No, ma'am, I don't have the number.
Take your time, movie.
All I can tell you is use the yellow pages. Let your fingers do the walking.
Not a joke, but an incredible simulation.
That's funny. I wonder why she hung up on me.
Maybe your bodily funk travels over the phone lines.
Enter Dr. Jenny Langer, played by Barbara Hale, no relation, who works at Montclair Observatory.
Then there are the quasars, neutron stars, and black holes, or collapsed stars.
Like Robert Downey.
Our sun is but one small star in a galaxy such as this.
Rosnap. Toke.
Now, a
Rosnap.
galaxy
Rosnap.
consists
Toke.
of not only the stars that we've talked
Petting.
about, but also
Toke.
great
Kiss.
swirling
Rope.
masses of dust
Rosnap.
and gas out
Snooze.
of which the
Spitball.
stars were formed.
In between hosting planetarium shows, Dr. Langer has discovered a large amount of gamma activity from the meteor site, determined by the sudden presence of multiple Incredible Hulks in the area. She sends this data to NASA in Houston, and they respond by sending the gruff and grumpy Dr. Vance, played by Steve Brody, to investigate further, which leads to some adorable gender expectation confusion.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Then the appointment must be with your husband.
Go Waddle Man.
I'm not sorry. Then it's probably with your brother.
No, my brother's an interior decorator in Oshkosh. You see, Dr. Vance, I'm afraid your appointment is with me. I'm Dr. Jenny Langer.
Humor of the 1840s.
And we have some very important business to discuss.
So you've had a sex change?
Meanwhile, Kester struts around his house in soiled long johns, toting a shotgun and generally being repellent.
I ought to put you over my knee. pull down your britches and spank the hell out of you.
Oh, I always wondered why you used to spank me so much. You could get you a jolly.
And the movie ramps up the repulsion.
This movie hates us, doesn't it?
He scours his backyard for the crater left behind by the meteor, which has brought with it countless strange rocks. Something dangerous is also afoot, as evidenced by numerous slaughtered cow carcasses littering the countryside, an effect lifted from tarantula and, dare I say, improved upon. He also shames his wife for being a fidgety addict again, because he clearly has the wiggle room to be judgmental.
You're hitting the booze again, huh?
Leave me alone, I feel terrible. This place is full of spiders.
Yeah, I know. Little pink ones.
No, big, black, hairy ones with furry legs.
No, that's me.
Sidebar. His poor wife, Ev, played by Leslie Parrish, does an amazing job playing the unsteady jitters of crippling addiction. She isn't given much to do other than drink and complain, but as somebody with pretty serious issues regarding substances, she gets my full endorsement. End sidebar. As all of these storylines inch closer to one another, threatening to collide and actually cause something to happen, Alan Hale's sheriff finally leaves his office to go to the local bar and lob dad jokes at everyone, resulting in my favorite riff of the experiment.
Hey, Helga. You're looking bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. You must have had some kind of a heavy date last night, huh?
You better believe it.
One of the loggers?
That's my secret.
What a delightful pig I am.
Yeah, Dutch, you got that Limburger cheese smile on your face again this morning. Had trouble last night?
Yeah.
One of the loggers?
What does that mean?
I don't know. I've had trouble myself.
Just random
Seemed
words.
like everybody was calling up with some cockamamie little thing. The car wouldn't start, the radio wouldn't work. And that preacher, man, he kept everybody awake last night.
When does that gospel wonga go on?
I don't know, but I'll tell you, he may work for God, but he sure hollers like the devil.
Oh, Alan!
The sheriff meets up with Drs. Langer and Vance, who are surveying the area and beginning to fall in love, ? A mood that he instantly ruins.
I'm sure he's taken physics.
Oh, I used to take physics. But now I find that
Joe coming in.
prunes do the better job for me.
Kester brings some of the space rocks into his quote-unquote house with the intention of breaking them open and capturing the treasure inside. Naturally, he's unable to do so, at least on purpose, and one of them cracks open on the floor, revealing a geode and the first of many spiders that will soon completely infest his home and get diced up into his wife's blended beverage. When she insists that she's actually seeing these spiders, Kester, ever the supportive husband, accuses her of having the DTs and takes the geode to be evaluated by the one man who may be as repulsive as he, his jeweler cousin.
What is that?
That's a geode. It's not from around here.
So let's beat it up.
You must have found that down south someplace, huh?
Take a look at these. Just how good are these diamonds here?
Are they worth 2 months of my welfare checks?
The diamond anniversary ring. Tell her you'd marry her right out of high school all over again.
Just seeing an old fingernail with dirt under... Oh, wait, that's mine.
So, seen Leatherface around here lately?
Just between you and me.
Yeah.
Oh. Sir, you will offend me.
While her husband is away, poor Ev is bombarded with spiders inside the house and runs out to safety only to be pounced upon by an oversized arachnid and eaten. The investigating doctors and Sheriff Alan Hale show up at Kester's farm asking questions, but Kester shoos them away to avoid their possible discovery of the patch of weed he's growing. Oh, and he has the skeletonized body of another spider victim buried somewhere on his property. You know, stuff. Shortly thereafter, while tending to his crater, a giant spider eats him through very unconventional means.
Does it matter that the spider ate him with his butt?
Well, I think it seems suitable for this guy.
Can you imagine how many interns it took to pull that guy up into the spider?
We say a bloody goodbye to a character who received a warm reception from the MST3K writer's room, or at least from Paul Chaplin, who had this to say, quote, "I like this Robert Easton. I thought he was really good in Giant Spider Invasion. Even when the spider was stuffing him up his butt, he played the role convincingly." End quote. Kester's jeweler cousin is also attacked by the giant spider, leading to his justifiable explosion, and another wall crawler attacks the Kester household with Ev's underage sister inside. In this scene, there was supposed to be a shot of a giant spider destroying the house, having been dropped from an off-camera crane as a bulldozer simultaneously ripped off the back wall. But during the execution of that scene, the legs of the spider prop went straight up into the air, and broken wood nearly impaled the crew inside the spider. this is not the last time people were almost killed during production. By this point in the narrative, the spider is no longer a secret menace and has made its way downtown, where many half-tipsy, certainly dangerous rednecks are dispatched by Sheriff Alan Hale to take the fight to the spider, which inspires a rallying cry. The spider's next destination of disaster, the local fairground festival, Gleason Days, where a Volkswagen Beetle covered in fur and spindly pipe cleaner legs attacks people attending a baseball game.
Come on, game! Packers!
Please, if you'll all just go back to your drinking.
The authorities scramble to come up with a solution to their spider problems, except for Sheriff Alan Hale, who again spends most of his time in his office.
Maybe if I kill myself like Hemingway, people will remember me fondly.
Meanwhile, star-crossed doctors Langer and Vance have come to an extraordinary conclusion. The spiders are invading through a miniature black hole at the crater site. Dr. Langer also discovers the little buggers crawling out of the geodes in her briefcase and has a natural reaction.
God, I hate paperwork.
You know, when Barbara Hale won her Oscar for this, she made a touching speech where she said, in effect, Vance!
The only option to curb the arachnid menace? Exploding a neutron device. The giant spider returns to the crater for some reason, and the doctors get their chance to bombard it with the device from above. After a flash of light and a reversal of film, the spider, instead of logically exploding, melts into a bunch of icky goo.
Packers won the Super Bowl! Packers!
Fun fact, the original effect was supposed to be a giant spider bursting into flames, achieved by covering the spider prop in gunpowder, with 2 crew members igniting it by dropping a match from above. But during shooting, they dropped 1 match, nothing doing. They dropped the second match, again, nothing. After an entire matchbook was dropped with no result, the camera was turned off. Seconds later, an impossibly large fireball shot up, liberating the crew members of some of their hair and starting brush fires all around. It didn't end up in the film. Instead, the final shot is of a melting spider with voiceover from the hack preacher bellowing about fire and brimstone.
The heavens open up and deluge the land with flies, frogs, lice, and locusts. It happened before, and it will happen again.
This film has a lot to say about religion. I don't understand it, but there's definitely a lot of it. Above all else, the giant spider invasion is a story about prejudice and preconceived notions. Namely that yes, the South is where true horrors lie, but Hicks can be found just about anywhere, and they are just as disgusting as any of the aggressors in Deliverance. The Kester character may be the most horrifying monster ever featured on the show, ranking with such creatures as the Creeping Terror, the Incredible Melting Man, and of course, Trumpy. Depending on who you ask, the giant spider invasion grossed between $15 and $22 million and over $2 million in video rentals in 1976 alone, a time when home video was not a truly viable market. These totals mystify me. This is one of the most enjoyably bad movies ever featured on the show, but I don't think I could ever pay for a ticket and watch it in a theater without Mike and the Bots in the corner, much less shell out an ungodly amount to have it accessible by VHS for a few days. This was released the same year as Jaws, which the movie directly references via an ADR line from Alan Hale during the calamitous conclusion, and still managed to be shockingly profitable. You learn new things every day.
Go Packers.
In case I failed in communicating my point, the giant spider invasion leans heavily on quote-unquote star Alan Hale Jr.'s connection to one of the most irritating and overrated sitcoms of the 1960s.
Didn't recognize your voice. Yes, what is it?
Little Buddy? Trouble? Lagoon?
Let's go back to 1964 and take a quick 3-hour tour to Gilligan's Island. Remember last time when we discussed Get Smart and I sang the praises of 1960s concept sitcoms? I don't have the same esteem for the likes of Gilligan's Island.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. The mate was a mighty sailing man, the skipper brave and sure. 5 passengers set sail that day for a 3-hour tour, a 3-hour tour. The weather started getting rough, the tiny ship was tossed. If not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. The minnow would be lost. The ship's aground on the shore of this uncharted desert isle, with Gilligan, the skipper too, the millionaire and his wife, the movie star, and the rest are here on Gilligan's Isle.
Creator Sherwood Schwartz is one of those television writers who seem to thrive on contrivance, something further evidenced by his other major series, The Brady Bunch, which hit airwaves 2 years after Gilligan's cancellation. The premise is very basic. Nimrods and one smart guy are shipwrecked on a desert isle and try to get home, only to have the best laid of plans blow up in their faces every 24 minutes. So little effort or ingenuity is put into the proceedings that it's irritating. It operates on 4 to 5 basic tropes recycled ad nauseum. Someone arrives on the island and causes trouble only to be miraculously saved at the end of the episode and leave the castaways behind, or the castaways would fashion technology out of bamboo and coconuts that would eventually be destroyed due to the titular character's incompetence, yada yada yada, etc. And then there's our central castaways. Bob Denver as Gilligan, a simpleton, who got the role after a few years of playing fake beatnik Maynard G. Krebs on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. Some guy named Alan Hale Jr., I don't know, as the skipper, aka the wrecker of the ship. Jim Backus, the voice of Mr. Magoo and James Dean's dad in Rebel Without a Cause, as Thurston Howell, an aloof millionaire, not to be confused with Thurston Moore, the lead guitarist of Sonic Youth. Natalie Schaefer, character actor on film and Broadway, as Mrs. Howell. Tina Louise, who went on to appear in The Stepford Wives and KTMA experiment SST Death Flight, as Ginger Grant, the glamorous movie star whom Gilligan slobbers over. Russell Johnson, who we mentioned before during our discussions of This Island Earth, and It Came from Outer Space, as the Professor, aka that smart guy that I mentioned, and Dawn Wells, the actor who most embraced the public's preoccupation with her character, as Mary Ann Summers, the traditional nice, cute girl who was meant to be the more grounded end of a love triangle with Ginger and Gilligan. These were all set characters that had every nuance beaten out of them by the end of the pilot, and never managed to evolve into anything but one-note joke machines. The dynamic between Skipper and Gilligan in particular is one of aggressive repetition and nakedly basic hack.
But we'd never get away from those sharks.
Thank goodness bamboo is filling.
We haven't got much raft left, but we'll get where we're going. We've got a good current behind us.
Yep, Skipper. From here on, it looks like smooth sailing. Skipper, do you think we should abandon ship?
It's too late. It's already abandoned us.
Every bumbling gag is telegraphed with no sense of grace or timing, and the proceedings usually have an air of those terrible sketches your cabin has to perform at the end of summer camp. In fact, if you took away the tropical backdrop and replaced it with a watercolor painting of an island on a small stage, the writing, performances, and staging would be identical. This is puzzling considering that the directors for the series include such names as Richard Donner and Jack fucking Arnold. As for characters, imagine Homer Simpson as written by an out-of-touch vaudeville performer. Now make every character Homer. That's Gilligan's Island. I made it through the 3rd episode before I had to take a break and watch some Green Acres to alleviate my lethal headache. But no matter how harsh my criticism or how short its original run was, 98 episodes over only 3 seasons, its legacy has, for some reason, proven to be very durable. 10 years after the debut of the series, Filmation, the producers of the cartoon Ghostbusters that wasn't actually related to the film of the same name, produced a remake. The New Adventures of Gilligan starred the original cast except for Tina Louise and Dawn Wells as Ginger and Mary Ann, with one additional castaway, Stubby the Monkey, and it lasted for 24 episodes over 3 years. In 1982, Gilligan and Company built a spaceship, presumably out of coconuts, and got spaceship wrecked on a far-off world for 12 episodes of Gilligan's Planet. You cannot make this shit up, people. In 1978, a 2-part special aired on NBC called Rescue from Gilligan's Island. a live-action TV movie in which the entire returning cast, aside from Tina Louise, which is kind of a recurring thing, getting rescued, returning to the mainland, and having difficulty reacclimating to modern life whilst dealing with Soviet spies. By the movie's end, they were shipwrecked on the island yet again. The next year, NBC aired The Castaways on Gilligan's Island, in which the millionaire Howells transformed the island from purgatory into a gateway resort, essentially the expensive version of regular purgatory. 2 years after that, the remaining castaways are still running the resort. Add Martin Landau and Barbara Bain, married co-stars of Mission Impossible and Space 1999, as enterprising villains trying to mine the island for the sitcom equivalent of vibranium, again, no joke, as well as new castaways, the Harlem Globetrotters, in 1981's cleverly titled The Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island. After this TV movie, the castaways took a permanent rest, never to appear in live action ever again, aside from cameos on various sitcoms. There were a slew of documentaries and retrospectives featuring select members of the cast, with Tina Louise usually taking every opportunity to sit out the festivities, but by the 2000s, fandom had cooled somewhat. TBS had a reality show titled The Real Gilligan's Island, which was basically a ripoff of Survivor, with the key change of having each tribesperson match the character archetypes of the castaways. It was not a success. But the biggest surprise of the decade was Warner Brothers' decision to remaster the original series in widescreen high definition. The Twilight Zone, The Prisoner, television masterpieces that can now be appreciated in stunning resolution. Gilligan's Island? Certainly a waste of resources. Moving on. The Giant Spider Invasion episode is almost entirely dedicated to a parody of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which we discussed in depth at the start of Chapter 11. But there are also a few moments that deserve a mention. First is the prologue, which features one of my favorite recurring bits, Servo in drag. Tom seems to be most comfortable when he's allowed to express his feminine side, and it doesn't get much better than him dressed as a high school cheerleader, complete with blonde pigtails, trying to summon spirit with no help from Mike or Crow.
Give me an S.
No.
Give me an A.
No.
Give me a T.
Nuh-uh.
Well, come on, you got to give me something.
Well, technically we don't, really.
Oh, come on, just give me the other T.
Well, what do we get out of it?
Yeah.
Spirit?
I'll tell you what, why don't we do that? Now, why don't you tell them?
Okay. We can give you an M, an R, a small X, and one L.
So Mrixel then. Woo! The satellite of love has got Mrixel, Mrixel, Mrixel. Have you got as much Mrixel as us? I don't think so.
We'll be right
we got
back.
the Mrixel. You got none.
And piggybacking on a clip that we played earlier, this episode has one of my favorite Bill Corbett as Crow moments, which begins on the bridge and continues into the theater. You see, Crow has overcaffeinated himself in order to avoid falling asleep and being replaced by a pod person.
Oh, God. What's that horrible thumping?
Yeah, it's my heart. I think I'm
He's gonna blow! Hurry up, you guys, please!
Why don't you get what? He's a freelance pooper scooper.
Ooh, they whacked the crypt keeper.
Whatever it is, it's drizzled with chocolate sauce.
Ah, good times. Next up, from the mid-70s to the end of the decade, with 1979's Parts, the Clonus Horror.
Something frightening is happening at a secret place called Clonus. Will the truth ever get out?
You all know what I stand for. I think it's time that I started paying back this country for some of the good things it's given me.
I don't know. Lena, there's something strange happening here that we're not allowed to know about.
There's something wrong we've been busted into.
They'll stop at nothing to keep it a secret. Because at Clonus, the only thing they don't use is the scream. Peter Graves. Dick Sargent, Timothy Donnelly, Paulette Breen, Keenan Wynn. Parts, the Clonus Horror. The motion picture that will steal your heart and your liver and your kidneys and your eyes.
Parts The Clonus Horror comes from Robert S. Fiveson, who made his bones writing, directing, and photographing several episodes of Leonard Nimoy's faux historical pseudoscientific investigative series In Search Of, and is easily one of my favorite directors ever featured on this show. Not because of a legacy of talent, that's certainly negligible, but because, like Warrior of the Lost World director David Worth before him, he's a damn good sport.
I thought, oh my God, the show it's so bad that they're going to rip it apart and laugh at it with these three little stupid robots. I'm dead. This is it. I've reached the ultimate low in my career. That thought lasted about 5 minutes, I think. And then I thought, wait a minute. No, this is a whole new audience. What's wrong with having your work spoofed? This is a great opportunity to become a part of new, modern, current American culture. This is great. I mean, the film sucks. It had no budget, okay? It's got some cheesy acting. It's just a good idea that was well executed, but it's got some raw edges. And who am I not to be laughed at? I mean, come on. Life's too short not to laugh at anything. So, actually, at the end of the day, I was very honored.
For his featured directorial debut, Fiveson assembled a cast of people best described as available. Tim Donnelly had several bit parts to his name before nabbing a series regular role on Emergency. Dick Sargent was best known for being Dick York's replacement on Bewitched, which inspired a schism in fandom that is still echoed in the never-ending Mike versus Joel debate. Character actor Keenan Wynn was the star of one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, A World of His Own, but also Season 7's Laser Blast. And my favorite, then host of A&E's biography, Airplane star Peter Graves, who previously appeared in Season 3's It Conquered the World and Season 5's Beginning of the End, and was only on set for one day.
You all know what I stand for.
Biography.
Boy, did they beat that dead horse whenever possible. Somewhere in the Southern California desert, there is a compound called clonus. Clonus is where the uber-rich pay exorbitant sums to have their genetic material grown into clones who will be cut to pieces for organ and limb harvesting should those parts be needed. But the clones don't know that they're clones. They're just very dim, oblivious people in upsettingly short shorts who essentially go to elementary school to be fed propaganda, engage in some subtly homoerotic exercise, and are forbidden from commingling. When the clones are needed by their owners, called sponsors, they will get to go to America, a beautiful paradise where all your dreams come true, but in actuality you end up freeze-dried in a bag. Sidebar. One of the many questions left unanswered by the film is what happens when an owner needs an ear, considering that every clone has an ear tag. End sidebar. One clone in particular, Tim Donnelly's Richard, finds a stray Milwaukee beer can in a stream and is transfixed by its existence. He cannot wrap his mind around the fact that there's a place he's never heard of called Milwaukee, and that the armed guards and scientists who populate the compound refuse to acknowledge this. His curiosity and suspicion causes him to start breaking the rules, starting by getting busy with another clone, awakening next to a dying fire that, because of the framing, appears to be emitting smoke from his crotch.
Guess I gotta go a little easier next time.
You know, right before I met you, I found a piece of metal, and it had a word on it.
Only you can prevent groin fires.
Milwaukee. And I asked, it came from America, and they said no. And then I asked the confession, said it was a plant from the ocean.
She really was on top of Old Smoky, huh?
He leaves his lady love in pursuit of escaping the compound and going to the promised land.
I think the only place I'm going to find any answers is America.
Today.
And I'm going to try and get there tonight.
Or today.
But Richard, you're not qualified.
He makes his way through several layers of gates, but does not liberate himself without any incident, and he is shot during his escape. Soon he's dazed and wandering the streets of downtown Los Angeles, eventually passing out in front of the house of a retired journalist, played by Keenan Ivory Wynn, who must have had gambling debts to pay in the 70s based on his film choices. Wynn brings clone Richard to the home of his unwitting sponsor, also named Richard, the brother of presidential candidate Jeffrey Knight, played by Peter Graves, who has yet to actually show up outside of the cold open at this point.
I'm starting to think that Peter Graves didn't invest much time in this movie.
Person Richard has his son take care of his ailing clone Richard and takes the opportunity to confront his brother at the docks in a scene that Graves clearly shot in less than an afternoon.
You saw the tape?
Yeah, and it's scary.
Adam Sandler's in it.
All right, you know part of the story. There is such a project.
On Biography tonight on A&E.
It's still in the experimental stage.
It's called Biography on Ice.
But the fact that you know about it leaves you sitting right in a keg of dynamite.
Oh, hey, remember to watch Biography, Paul Lynn tonight.
By the way, Mike and the bots make a fatal miscalculation by overloading on the biography references and refusing to drop a single airplane reference. Person Richard and his brother have a debate about the ethics of cloning, and Jeffrey casually mentions that Person Richard's clone has been growing for 30 years, which means that clonus operated in the 1940s at the latest.
What? That's right. Hearts, kidneys, lungs, all of that.
Thumbs, elbows, nasal hair.
If a person needs an organ transplant, his clone, which is an exact duplicate of him, can provide him one very easily.
Used for transplants for who?
Well, obviously not for everyone. That wouldn't be practical or economical.
Or Republican.
For the select few. Those the politicians decide. Are you going to create a master race?
Consider the possibility. Now, suppose Einstein had lived. Suppose Churchill or Roosevelt had been able to live for nearly 200 years and still function for the world.
Or Stalin. Or Hitler.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The Clonus facility is tipped off to clone Richard's whereabouts and lure him back to the compound, where his lady love has been lobotomized and he's promptly frozen and bagged. Cleaners arrive at Person Richard's home to kill any witnesses, including Keenan Wynn's journalist and Person Richard's son, whom they drown in his own swimming pool. Person Richard and his politician brother have a vicious tussle, which ends in the politician's impalement. But, surprise, surprise, the next day, Jeffrey Knight is well and back on his feet giving a stump speech for the campaign as if nothing has happened. But the speech is crashed when a reporter asks him about Clonus, the intro tape for which has been sent to the media by Wynn before his death. The good guys die, the bad guys have to give explanations. It's the way of the world. It's the way of America. And if you thought that the movie being over would be the end of the damn biography jokes, you clearly didn't foresee that the end credits were rather lengthy.
James Arness. As a young boy, James Arness nurtured a howling bitterness in the face of the awesomely superior talent of his brother, Peter Graves. Peter Graves' life and career were marked by a generosity of spirit and loving attitude towards his fellow man, which were altogether missing in the pitted soul of James Arness. Often, James Arness' mother would remark to friends that she loved her son Peter Graves so very, very much, while she hated James Arness and cursed the day her womb had been blighted with such a creature. James Arness, ugly and stupid, tonight on Biography.
That's
Okay.
That's as
we
good
got
as
it.
it gets. So, Peter Graves.
Biography.
Biography.
Clonus the movie, not the facility, is a perfect example of a great concept hampered by a very low budget. If the filmmakers had the time to work out the kinks in the story and solidify the logic further, maybe work out the timeline, this has the potential to be a much better film. As it stands, not great, but promising. Speaking of bigger budgets but not working out the kinks, believe it or not, 2 major Hollywood studios made a very similar movie completely coincidentally and definitely without permission in 2005 with Michael Bay at the helm. Let's briefly discuss The Island.
He brought you Bad Boys, The Rock, and Armageddon.
I love this stuff.
On July 22nd.
What was that?
I don't know, but I want one.
Enjoy the ride.
How come we never did this before?
Because nobody does summer like director Michael Bay.
Good job!
The Island. Rated PG-13. July 22nd.
It is the future, the year 2019. And our protagonists are 2 simple-minded, curious lovers in white jumpsuits, Lincoln 6 Echo and Jordan 2 Delta, played by Ewan McGregor and an absurdly gorgeous Scarlett Johansson. They live in a sleek, clinical facility with hundreds to thousands of like-minded, obedient, be-jumpsuited knuckleheads. They have been told since birth by their Big Brother-esque handlers that the world outside the facility is completely contaminated except for one safe haven, the island. Every week, the facility holds a lottery to send one quote-unquote lucky quote-unquote soul to the island, which is just a smokescreen for harvesting the winner's organs, as they are merely clones of rich people who live in a totally non-contaminated society. Sound familiar at all? A very inquisitive Lincoln 6 Echo, with the assistance of a maintenance worker played by Steve Buscemi, accidentally witnesses the organ harvesting process and decides to break out of the facility and get some answers about his human counterpart, with Jordan 2 Delta in tow. Together they escape and make their way to Los Angeles. They get into various scrapes, encounter Lincoln's doppelganger, and have a completely superfluous hoverbike chase before returning to the facility and, in a cop-out conclusion, free all the clones and sail over the horizon together in an expensive yacht. It is the bare bones of clonus made ludicrously expensive and quote-unquote sexy, caked in rampant misogyny, which is expected for Michael Bayhem picture, and photographed with a camera that never stops moving but never moves toward anything interesting or new, capped off by noisy, pointless action that does nothing to serve the plot, and if anything, shows a lack of faith in the concept. Still, source material-wise, it may be the smartest thing that Bay has ever had his name on, and despite the very low bar before it, proves that his cinematic preoccupations like explosions, hypercuts, sledgehammer subtlety, juvenile regressive comedy are all part of his identity and cannot be shedded, even at his most restrained. Shortly before The Island hit theaters, Robert Fison and co-producer Merle A. Schreibman filed a suit against distributors Warner Brothers and DreamWorks, alleging at least 90 separate instances of copyright infringement. I thought I counted more, but I will definitely support their count. And they sought to have it removed from theaters and cancel any overseas distribution. This technique failed to make waves, though the movie was the first box office failure of Michael Bay's career, but eventually the suit was scheduled to go to trial in early 2007. Naturally, to avoid embarrassment, DreamWorks settled out of court a few months before the trial date, with Fison and Schreibman walking away with an undisclosed seven-figure sum. Fison addressed the plagiarism suit in an interview for the Shout Factory DVD of the Clonus episode, and in particular the settlement between the producers and DreamWorks, casually dropping a bombshell.
Supplemental gratuitous statement by the director. I want to thank the fans of this movie and of Mystery Science Theater 3000 for supporting the fight that we had. I may go to prison for what I said about the island and the settlement. I don't know. But the bottom line is, you guys really, really inspired us to stay on it. Thank you. Enjoy the movie.
Wait a second. He might go to prison? This was a much more interesting interview than I realized. The Clonus episode is the first episode of the next iteration of the series in that Kevin Murphy fulfilled his destiny and became the producer, with Jim Mellon hanging in the wings as executive producer. Kevin also directed an unbroken run of episodes, starting with I Was a Teenage Werewolf and continuing up to Agent for Harm, which was Mike Nelson's directorial debut. There was a noticeable uptick in quality with this regime change, which is even more impressive when you consider that in any scene not set on the bridge or the SOL, Kevin is usually wearing ape makeup. That's dedication. This episode is the beginning of a saga of those irascible little space children, but it's bookended by two fun moments of the SOL gang dealing with insecurity over their physical appearance. First, Mike demonstrates new facial hair and gets compliments. Initially.
Sporting a mustache for the very first time. I'm a little worried about how Tom and Crow are going to react.
Hey, Mike, a new mustache. Hey, it looks good. It really does.
You think?
Yeah, it's great. It looks good.
No kidding. Well, that went well. We'll be right back.
Yeah, it's a look that challenges people. Good for you, Mike.
Yeah, it says, I look like this and I don't even care. I say go, man, go.
Oh, well, great, thanks. We'll be right back.
It gives you a sort of Howard Sprague elan.
Yeah.
Only not so overtly macho.
Oh, yeah, an unqualified success, so long as no one looks directly at your face.
Right.
Then there's Crow's cosmetic alteration, which is a little more drastic.
Yeah. So, what do you think of my new nose job?
It's downright Bruce Jennerian.
Yeah, well, I went a little deeper than I might because I figured I could always add more later if I wanted.
Mike Bobo's calling.
What are you looking at?
Up next, 1964's exhaustingly titled The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies.
Look, then run for your life. Incredible is the word for the world's first monster musical. See in magnificent Eastman color, the daring, dancing, enticing, and horrifying.
The incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed-up zombies. From the innocence of music and laughter comes the twilight of terror. Along the midway, scantily clad dancers luring the young lovers into the sideshows.
She gets her shook out of shape.
See the dancing girls of the carnival murdered by the incredible night creatures of the midway.
I will know that something evil lies ahead for me.
An unspeakable pit of dismal subhuman monsters who drool and gibber, moaning for the thrill of revenge. Incredible are the songs, the gaiety, the zombie stomp of those who will stop living. And then the mix-up, trickery, and the device to ruin.
Do as Madame Estrella said.
The world's first monster musical. The incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed-up zombies.
Incredibly Strange Creatures is MST3K's second run-in with director Ray Dennis Steckler, though you're probably scratching your head as to how. Steckler, who also stars in this experiment under the pseudonym Cash Flag, was an assistant cameraman on Season 5's EGA, and is also the man that the titular caveman throws into the pool during that movie's conclusion.
He left the road right here.
Watch out for snakes.
Who said that?
Steckler made his directorial debut with 1962's Wild Guitar, starring EGOS Archibald Jr., and after a few Z-grade efforts, Rat Finka Boo Boo possibly being the most memorable, retreated into softcore sex flicks like Teenage Massage Parlor, Rufus Potter's Hooker Scam, and The Sexorcist for the remainder of his career. The cast is stocked with unknown bit players, but there was sufficient talent literally behind the camera, not one but two soon-to-be superstar cinematographers. Vilmos Zsigmond, who cut his teeth on low-budget exploitation like the MST Revival's Time Travelers and This, before shooting masterpieces like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Images, Deliverance, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, The Deer Hunter, and Winter Kills, which we discussed in our mini-sode of Spider-Man Far From Home. But not just him. Laszlo Kovacs, who went from This to several National Geographic specials before shooting Targets, Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, Paper Moon, Shampoo, Ghostbusters, Say Anything, and, sadly, Jack Frost with Michael Keaton. Discovering that these masters of light and shadow helped shoot something so grimy, stained, and almost syphilitic, beyond Roger Corman's cheapest work, it's shocking. But I suppose that everyone has to start somewhere.
The whole movie has an oily T-zone.
Steckler stars as Jerry, a schlub in a hoodie who looks like the ongoing origin story for Splinter from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Jerry takes his girlfriend Angela and buddy Harold to the carnival at the Long Beach amusement park The Pike for a harmless day of sideshows, riding the wild mouse, and seemingly endless atonal production numbers with questionable choreography.
This is the show where the Hells Angels beat up a lot of people.
She's tapped into the rebellious spirit of data entry people everywhere.
It's a Mobius strip of music. It leads nowhere and comes from nowhere. You know what I'm looking at right now?
What?
That exit sound.
Oh, yeah.
Jerry is hypnotized by a stripper named Carmelita into watching her terrible musical act, and later hypnotized again by Carmelita's sister Estrella into becoming one of the titular zombies and attacking and killing his friends and some carnies. Point of fact, Estrella has been turning everyone that comes her way into zombies with the help of her frightening stooge Ortega, whom we'll discuss later, and although you would think that since it's a horror movie, this would be the main through line, no. It's the goddamn music.
Shrimp out of shape? What?
Shick out of shape. Oh, okay.
I think this is a can't.
Well, then try Gillette.
Julie Eisenhower like you've never seen her.
What do the huge plumage bird women have to do with the chick out of shape?
She's She's the hardest working dental hygienist in showbiz.
First blade lifts, the second one cuts, you get your shit out of shape.
Now everybody shave!
Replace your blade every 2 weeks.
No nicks or cuts, comfort and convenience.
After the, and literally I counted, 87th production number, Jerry frees a dungeon full of zombified carnival patrons the only time they appear, who then quickly kill their creators, including poor, hapless Ortega. Zombie Jerry then takes to the shoreline, police in tow, who gun him down amidst the crashing waves.
No, I don't know if I ever told you this, Mike, but my life, my love, and my lady is the sea.
Yeah, you did actually.
Oh, I did,
You mentioned
sorry.
that one. Yeah.
Steckler invented the marketing gimmick of hallucinogenic hypnovision to sell his movie, which was nothing more than having people in rubber masks running down the aisles and attempting to scare audience members during scenes in which Steckler's character is hypnotized into murdering innocents. It was also billed as the first quote-unquote monster musical, something that a future experiment, Horror of Party Beach, also boasted just a month earlier. But my favorite tidbit about the incredibly strange creatures involves, of all people, Stanley fucking Kubrick. Steckler's original title for the movie was The Incredibly Strange Creature, or Why I Stopped Living and Became a Mixed-Up Zombie, but Columbia Pictures was about to release Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, and hit Steckler with a lawsuit to avoid title confusion in the marketplace. Steckler was astounded that a major studio would be threatened by his minuscule budgeted production, so he called the studio to assuage their fears and got nowhere, until he got a hold of Kubrick. The two had a brief conversation, Steckler proposed the title that is currently used, Kubrick was satisfied, and no one would ever confuse the two movies ever again.
My anaconda don't want none unless you got buns, hon.
The Incredibly Strange episode has some quality host segments. First up, Servo and Crow are hitting Mike up for money as part of Walkathon season.
Well, I'm walking for helping children through research and development.
Oh, HackTrad. Yeah, I think I've heard of that group. That's a good group.
No, actually, helping children through research and development is the acronym, Mike. It stands for, Hi, everyone. Let's pitch in and get cracking here in Louisiana doing right, eh? Now then, hateful, rich, overbearing, ugly guys hurt royally every time someone eats a radish, carrot, hors d'oeuvre and never does dishes. Eventually, Victor eats lunch over Peoria mit ein neues Burger Tog.
Later on, Mike turns to the nanites for a haircut and gets the same stylist I've gotten every visit to Supercuts when they actually speak English.
Shelly! Hi, Mike. I'm Shelly. How you doing today? Great. Let's just take a look here. Has your head always been this big, or so you had the day off today, or so you work around here, or oh, sounds fun. Looks like you're taking care of what's left of your hair. Great. There you go, Mark. Do you need some product, or maybe some coconut algae Dijonnaise leave-in conditioner?
And finally, Incredibly Strange Creatures introduce the world to the fascinatingly grotesque character of Ortega, who is basically Mexican Bob from The Hateful Eight infested with beard mites. Paul Chaplin played him on the show, which amounted to grunting while wearing a rubber mask. In this episode, Ortega ends up invited onto the SOL and becomes the series surrogate for Torgo until the end of the Sci-Fi Channel run.
Oh, Ortega, my good man. These rellenos with crab and smoky Gouda. Fresh crab? Oh, I thought so. Delicious.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Ah! What the hell is that?
Oh, I think that's the sweet potato hash with tomatillos and smoked flank steak.
Not the food. I'm talking about him.
That is Ortega. I hired him to cater this little movie break, Mike. This is his first job, and you're embarrassing me.
How did you get him up here?
Well, I contacted his website, and he set everything up.
Our last episode discussion for the week is going to be a brief one, as it's the conclusion of the MST3K Russo-Finnish troika of beautifully photographed folk tales whose appeal I simply don't get. Jack Frost.
Once upon a time, in the town of Medford, there lived a man named Jack Frost.
Happy holidays! You guys are great!
Are all musicians really flaky?
Yeah. He had a beautiful wife and a loving son, but his job kept him away from home.
I brought you this.
And your harmonicas?
I got that the morning you were born. And you play that no matter where I am. I can hear it.
Then one night...
No, not that one. The other one.
One cold night, science and evil collide. Oh, yeah.
Also not the right one. That's more like it. It's an episode that's not typically in my regular rotation, but it's not a judgment call in the slightest. It's the kind of spectacle film that Americans are only used to through imports, a creepy, theatrical Technicolor marvel with talking chickens, bear man hybrids, houses with feet, hunchback fairies, giant Groot monsters, and other assorted confounding visual delights. But because it's steeped in a culture that is so foreign and clearly re-edited and recontextualized by stateside distributors who didn't understand what they had, I find it almost impossible to follow even with riffs, and the riffs are outstanding. I couldn't break down the story if I was watching the film and writing this episode simultaneously, so I will spare you any attempt.
You get bored. I get bored.
You get bored?
Come on, play with me. Let's play hide and seek together. With you? Play hide and seek? Yes. You're joking. I catch you in no time. Think so? Yes, I think so. If you catch me, I'll give you a well-bent bow and some nice straight arrows. Is that a bargain?
It's a bargain, Father Mushroom.
I thought Jerry Garcia was Father Mushroom.
Finally, I have a boyfriend.
I'm Hans. Oh, forget it.
I'm gonna go hunt for your cousin Corn Smut instead.
The episode built around Jack Frost also has some great stuff in it, starting with the prologue, which is the best brains take on the astoundingly pompous Michael Flatley and his steadfast belief that he's the messiah of dance.
The world's #1 dance show is coming to Australia and New Zealand direct from the West End. Michael Flatley presents Lord of the Dance, Dangerous Gaze.
Ladies and Gypsy, Michael Nelson is Lord of the Dance.
Oh! Did the other one die?
No. Anyway, Michael Nelson is Lord of the Dance.
Oh, 3, 4. Yay!
This segment is also notable for being Jim Mallon's last appearance as Gypsy, with production designer and Gypsy puppeteer for the Mystery Science movie, Patrick Brantzig, taking over in Experiment 815, Agent for Harm. There's no fanfare, no note of transition, just a quiet transference. As vilified as Mallon is in the Misty community, justifiably so, he's still my favorite Gypsy. Although I enjoy Patrick's take on her quite a bit, especially as he got to stretch his legs a bit. On to the episode. Before the experiment begins in earnest, we get to spend some time with Brain Guy and Bobo, who have a dynamic reminiscent of dueling siblings trying to persuade a babysitter to let them have free reign.
Do you mind terribly if I explain?
Oh, be my guest. You're not in charge. He's not in charge.
Later in the episode, Crow presents Mike with a surprising revelation that would become something of a recurring bit throughout the remainder of the series.
Well, Tom, I suppose we ought to check in on those two and make sure there's no...
problem here, guys. I'm a bear.
Oh, I'm so sure.
Yep, I'm a bear. That little, that mushroom head elf guy, you know?
Yeah.
He did it.
Oh. Huh. And where did this happen?
Just, around. Some luck, huh?
Yeah. You sure you just didn't hot glue some fur to yourself?
Hey, I wish.
Yeah, well, a bear.
He's wearing the fur for most of an entire theater segment, but he changes back to normal during a commercial break.
Hey, not a bear anymore. Mushroom guy turned me back.
Yeah. Really?
And at the very end of the episode, the show's hostility towards Scandinavians resurfaces when Servo impersonates the lead character, Nastinka. They manage to last the entire experiment without using the word squarehead. But on the bridge, not so much.
No, Mike, I'm really cute. In fact, I'm dowling.
You're dowling? What, wooden rods?
I don't know what he's trying to say.
No, I'm dowling.
Dowling. He's Joe Dowling, artistic director of the Guthrie Theater.
He doesn't wear
I don't mean to
dress.
criticize.
No, you're stupid.
It's very simple. I'm adorable.
You're endowable. Oh, I see, Mike. I think what he's trying to say is that if you and I wanted to set up an endowment, he's the guy to
No,
talk
you
to.
stupid, loathsome freaks. I'm precious.
I'm as cute as a widow Budden.
Oh, the Widow Buddig. You know, Carl Buddig Press Meat Products?
Oh,
He's the
excellent
widow.
farm meat.
You make me sick. Look, just forget it, you couple of morons. I'm cute, okay? I'm cute like that scrawny little squarehead in the movie, but just forget it. The whole cute thing's in the crapper.
And that is where we end this episode of the Coolness Chronicles. Today, my first journals about the 2020 project, A Year of Cinematic Discovery, will start dropping at tumblr.com. The link can be found in the episode description. New journals debut at least twice a week. And next week, the first minisode in which I cover the best, or at least most interesting discoveries I've experienced thus far, exclusively at patreon.com/coolnesschronicles. $5 gets you access to not just hours of bonus content like all the Goes to the Movies installments, but every single week that there isn't a new hour of the podcast proper, there will be guaranteed new minisodes. Your patronage helps keep this show, the one you're listening to right now, survive. 2 weeks from today, we'll continue our deep dive into MST3K's 8th season with another compromised masterpiece from Orson Welles, a double feature of cosmic Japanese superheroes, more 70s jive than you turkeys could ever possibly handle, and a tribute to the cinematic resume of the one and only purple one, His Royal Badness, Prince. All that and much, much more as we continue to chart the history and legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But before we take off for the week, the first installment of a new regular feature. As I said moments ago, I'm knee-deep into a huge project throughout this year, a year of cinematic discovery, at least one new film per day, and nothing I've seen before is permitted. Because our Patreon only reaches a small percentage of our weekly free subscribers, I decided to include some of my favorite movies from the project at the end of every episode of the regular podcast. Little short bursts of discovery. It's Ryan's recommendation. My favorite film of all time is The Empire Strikes Back. Watching the special edition in a theater in 1997 was one of those eye-opening, transformative experiences that is etched into my memory. The scope, the visual ambition, the heavy sense of foreboding, the emotional complexity, the sheer gall of following up the defining blockbuster of the 1970s with a dour punch in the gut, ringing in the 80s with uncertainty and loss. It inspired me to think more clearly and analytically about my own screenwriting and criticism, and made me interested in chasing the careers of those who put it together. For instance, noticing Lee Brackett's credit led me to her earlier work like The Big Sleep. For the longest time, I considered this the most interesting film released in 1980. And then I saw Richard Rush's action comedy drama mystery thriller, a lot of genres at play here, The Stuntman.
Step right up, folks. Ride the ride of the century on Eli's killer crane.
The Stuntman. A man on the run. The woman who had to know why.
Who the hell are you?
And the director who offered him a hiding place.
You should be a stuntman, who is an actor, who is a character in a movie, who is an enemy soldier, who looked for you amongst all those.
The Stuntman. In a world where nothing is what it seems, the hardest stunt is to hold on to reality.
It doesn't change the fact that the man is crazy.
It's the insanity of violence and the madness of make-believe.
You're cheating me. You look at me like I'm some kind of damn movie. Well, I'm not. I'm real. I want this shot. Hang on, baby. We're all free.
Trapped in a nightmare, wrapped up in a movie. The Stuntman, an outrageous leap into the unexpected.
A sketchy-looking young fugitive accidentally causes a car driving towards him to plummet off a bridge, presumably killing the driver. He looks below incredulously, but sees no wreckage in the water. A camera-toting helicopter comes out of nowhere, and a director calls cut, revealing that the fugitive has stumbled upon an incognito film set, and that the disappeared driver was a stuntman. The director, Eli Cross, masterfully played by Peter O'Toole, notices the fugitive's predicament. Cross offers him asylum on the set as a replacement stuntman for the man he may have killed, which he accepts in desperation, having no prior experience or even comprehension of his situation. The film Cross is directing is a World War I epic, anachronistically shot on the grounds of a large Californian hotel, and he will do anything or say anything to see his vision realized. Insidious deception and psychological mindfuckery are his bread and butter, but nothing, no matter how simple, is what it seems. What is fiction? What is objective truth? What is happening? I will not say any more about what this fugitive stumbles into, nor will I say who this fugitive truly is. The Stuntman is an utter laceration of the movie industry, a satire of directorial ambition, an exhilarating deconstruction of narrative itself, a juggling act of tones and concepts and questions. There is so much at play, and it has so much on its mind, that I don't think I have a complete handle on it, and I watched it twice back to back. Having seen this on the third day of the project was a sign that some weird shit is afoot, and I couldn't ask for a more encouraging notion. Thank you to everyone involved in making MST3K for everything they've contributed to my life and to culture as a whole. Double thanks for writing the episode guide that I quote frequently in this season of the pod. I also want to thank Shout Factory for their excellent supplemental material that was invaluable to my research for this and every episode to follow on this subject. If you want to support the artist who made this wonderful show, many episodes are available on VOD at rifftracks.com. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy what you hear, please rate and review the show on iTunes or your chosen source, and share it with anyone you can, any way you can. This has been the largest and most fulfilling endeavor I've ever seen to completion, and it would be nice to keep making the show until it just isn't fun anymore. Have any questions or comments, or is there anything I missed in this particular chapter? Contact me on Twitter at CoolnessPodRyan or on our Facebook page, and keep on the lookout for updates. Special thanks to our amazing patrons Bill M., Christopher H., Christopher J., Tracy R., Zach F., and Jenny R. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, do what you love, don't be a dick, and as always...
And that's when the chuds came at me.
Mama's waking up to give me well. She gets the shit out of shape. Shook out of shape. She gets the shit out of shape. Doing the twist. She slips the twist. When she does a twist, she gets the shit out of shape.
Darn, that's the end.